In the theater of human relationships, words are both currency and weapon, gift and poison. When dealing with the avoidant personality, most people commit the fatal error of believing that more communication leads to greater understanding, that transparency breeds intimacy, that emotional availability will be met with emotional reciprocity. They pour their hearts out like water into sand, watching their words disappear into the void of avoidant indifference, never understanding why their generosity is met with retreat. The avoidant operates by different rules, ancient rules that govern power, mystery, and control. They understand instinctively what most people never learn, that saying less gives you more power, that mystery creates desire, that withholding breeds obsession. While you exhaust yourself explaining your feelings, justifying your needs, and laying bare your emotional landscape, the avoidant watches from their fortress of silence, growing bored with your predictability and irritated by your emotional excess. But there exists a counter-strategy, one that requires discipline, intelligence, and the wisdom to understand that in the game of human attraction, less is infinitely more powerful than more. When you learn to speak less, you force the avoidant to come to you. When you master the art of strategic silence, you become the mystery they cannot solve, the puzzle that demands their attention, the only person in their life who refuses to be easily read and quickly dismissed. The power of strategic silence. Silence is the most underestimated weapon in the arsenal of human interaction, yet it remains the one tool that the emotionally generous consistently refuse to wield. They mistake silence for coldness, withholding for cruelty, and strategic communication for manipulation. In their eagerness to connect, they surrender the very power that could command respect and create genuine intrigue in the avoidant mind. The avoidant has spent their entire life surrounded by people who talk too much, explain too much, and reveal too much of themselves too quickly. They have grown accustomed to partners who lay their emotional cards on the table within moments of meeting, who confess their deepest fears before trust has been established, who mistake emotional vomiting for intimacy. This predictable pattern of oversharing has taught the avoidant that most people are open books, easily read and quickly discarded once their contents have been absorbed. But silence disrupts this pattern with surgical precision. When you refuse to fill every pause with words, when you allow conversations to breathe with empty space, when you resist the urge to explain every emotion and justify every action, you force the avoidant to work for information that others give away freely. Suddenly, they find themselves in the unfamiliar position of pursuing rather than being pursued, of asking questions rather than deflecting them, of genuinely wondering what lies beneath your calm exterior. Strategic silence operates on the fundamental principle that the human mind abhors a vacuum and will rush to fill empty spaces with imagination, projection, and curiosity. When you speak less, the avoidance mind begins to work overtime, creating stories about your thoughts, motivations, and feelings. They become invested in solving the puzzle of your silence, attributing depth and complexity to your restraint that they never granted to others' emotional exhibitions. The power of silence lies not in its cruelty, but in its efficiency. While others exhaust themselves trying to bridge emotional gaps through endless explanation, you allow the gap to exist, forcing the avoidant to notice it and wonder about it. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their own emotional unavailability back to them, making them uncomfortable with their own patterns for perhaps the first time in their adult life. Most importantly, silence preserves your power by preventing you from saying things that diminish your position. Every word you speak in pursuit of an avoidant is a small surrender of your authority, a tiny admission that you need their validation more than they need yours. When you learn to hold your tongue, you maintain the illusion that you have options, that their attention is welcome but not necessary, that their approval is pleasant, but not essential for your emotional survival. The avoidant respects silence because they understand its value. They have built their entire personality around the strategic withholding of information, emotion, and availability. When they encounter someone else who understands this game, who can match their restraint with even greater restraint, they experience the rare sensation of meeting their match. Your silence becomes a form of communication more powerful than any words you could speak. Silence also forces the avoidant to confront their own discomfort with emotional ambiguity. They are accustomed to partners who eliminate all mystery through constant communication, who remove all doubt through persistent explanation. Your strategic silence reintroduces uncertainty into their carefully controlled world, making them aware of how much they have come to depend on others' emotional transparency to maintain their position of power. The hunger for what remains hidden. Human nature harbors a perverse fascination with the forbidden, the concealed, and the deliberately withheld. What we cannot have immediately becomes infinitely more desirable than what is freely offered. The avoidant, despite their pose of emotional independence, remains as susceptible to this fundamental psychological law as any other human being. Perhaps more so, because their entire identity is built around the belief that they are above such base human needs as curiosity and desire. When you consistently reveal less than others expect, you tap into this primal hunger with devastating effectiveness. The avoidant becomes fixated on the parts of yourself that you keep private, the thoughts you don't share, the emotions you don't display. They begin to believe that your hidden depths contain treasures worth discovering, secrets worth knowing, mysteries worth solving. Your restraint transforms you from an open book into a locked vault, and the avoidant discovers they possess a burning desire to find the key. This hunger operates independently of the avoidant's conscious will. They may tell themselves they prefer partners who are straightforward and uncomplicated, who don't play games or create unnecessary drama. But their behavior tells a different story. They gravitate toward the very qualities they claim to despise: complexity, unpredictability, and the tantalizing possibility that there is always more to discover beneath the surface. The hidden exerts its power because it promises transformation of the mundane into the significant. When every detail of your life is known, catalogued, and understood, you become predictable. Predictability breeds contempt in the avoidant mind, which seeks novelty and stimulation to combat the emotional numbness that characterizes their inner world. But when crucial aspects of your experience remain concealed, every interaction carries the potential for revelation, every conversation the possibility of breakthrough. Your hidden qualities become more valuable precisely because they are scarce. Economic principles govern emotional attraction just as surely as they govern material markets. What is abundant loses value, while what is rare commands premium prices. By keeping significant portions of yourself private, you create artificial scarcity that drives up your perceived worth in the avoidant's psychological marketplace. The avoidant's hunger for your hidden qualities grows stronger when they realize that others have failed to access what you keep protected. They begin to see themselves as uniquely qualified to penetrate your defenses, specially chosen to receive what you deny to others. This belief feeds their ego while simultaneously making them more invested in the relationship than they intended to become. Most crucially, the hunger for what remains hidden transforms the avoidant from a passive recipient of others' emotional offerings into an active pursuer of information, attention, and access. They find themselves asking questions they normally wouldn't ask, showing interest they normally wouldn't display, making efforts they normally wouldn't make. Your strategic concealment has reversed the typical dynamic, forcing them into the unfamiliar role of the one who seeks rather than the one who is sought. The hidden creates its own momentum, generating increasingly intense curiosity that feeds on itself. Each small revelation makes the avoidant hunger for more, while each continued concealment makes them more determined to uncover what remains protected. They become addicted to the process of discovery, finding themselves genuinely engaged with another person's complexity for perhaps the first time in their adult life. Words as weapons against yourself. Every word you speak to an avoidant in pursuit of connection becomes ammunition they will use against you in their campaign of emotional warfare. Your confessions of vulnerability become evidence of your weakness. Your expressions of need become proof of your desperation. Your attempts at emotional honesty become weapons they can deploy whenever they need to maintain distance or justify their withdrawal. The tragic irony is that you arm your opponent with the very sincerity that you believe will win their affection. The avoidant collects your words like a strategist gathering intelligence about enemy positions. When you tell them you miss them, they file this information away as evidence of your dependence. When you express hurt at their distance, they catalog this as confirmation of your emotional instability. When you attempt to explain your feelings, they store these explanations as future justification for why the relationship cannot work. You provide them with a detailed map of your emotional terrain, not realizing they will use it to avoid rather than approach your most sensitive areas. Your words become weapons against yourself because they eliminate the mystery that might otherwise intrigue the avoidant mind. Each explanation you offer removes another layer of complexity from your persona. Every emotional confession transforms you from an enigma worth solving into a problem to be managed. The avoidant prefers puzzles to proclamations, riddles to revelations. When you speak too freely of your inner world, you rob yourself of the very qualities that might capture their imagination. The most dangerous words are those spoken in moments of emotional crisis, when your guard is down and your need is highest. These desperate communications reveal the extent of your investment in someone who has made no corresponding investment in you. The avoidant reads these words not as touching displays of affection, but as evidence of your poor emotional regulation and questionable judgment. They wonder why anyone would invest so deeply in someone who gives so little in return. Your words become weapons when they reveal the power imbalance that exists between you. Every plea for more attention advertises your position of weakness. Every request for emotional availability demonstrates their position of strength. Every expression of confusion about their behavior shows them exactly how much control they possess over your emotional state. You hand them the sword with which they will cut you down, then wonder why they use it so efficiently. The avoidance memory is particularly sharp when it comes to your moments of emotional excess. They remember exactly what you said when you were upset, precisely how you begged when you were desperate, specifically how you pleaded when you were afraid of losing them. These memories become their insurance policy against ever taking you seriously again. Why would they respect someone who has already shown them the depths of their willingness to debase themselves for scraps of attention? Most destructively, your words reveal your strategy, making you utterly predictable to someone who values unpredictability above all else. When you constantly communicate your feelings, needs, and intentions, you eliminate any element of surprise from your interactions. The avoidant can calculate your responses with mathematical precision, knowing exactly what you will say, how you will react, and what you will do next. This predictability breeds the very contempt you are trying to avoid through your honest communication. Your verbal weapons against yourself are most powerful when they reveal your lack of options. When you speak too frequently of your love, your commitment, your willingness to work on the relationship, You signal that you have nowhere else to go. The avoidant understands that people with genuine choices don't spend their time talking about how committed they are to someone who shows them minimal interest. Your words become proof that you are exactly where you deserve to be, in love with someone who cannot love you back. The avoidant's fear of your depth. Beneath the avoidant's pose of emotional superiority lies a terror so profound that their entire personality structure has been built to defend against it. The fear that someone else possesses the emotional depth and complexity they have spent their lifetime avoiding. When you speak less and reveal less, you force them to confront the possibility that your inner world contains riches they cannot access, dimensions they cannot understand, and experiences they cannot control or predict. The avoidant has organized their life around the comfortable belief that other people are simple, needy, and easily understood. This belief allows them to maintain their sense of emotional superiority while justifying their withdrawal from intimate connection. But when you refuse to display your entire emotional landscape for their inspection, when you keep crucial aspects of yourself private and protected, you shatter this comfortable illusion and force them to acknowledge that you might be far more complex than they assumed. Your depth becomes threatening because it suggests capacities within yourself that the avoidant has deliberately suppressed within themselves. When you demonstrate the ability to feel deeply while maintaining your composure, to care intensely while preserving your dignity, to love fully while retaining your independence, you become a living reminder of everything they have sacrificed in their pursuit of emotional safety. Your depth makes their shallowness visible, even to themselves. The avoidant fears your depth because it represents emotional territory they cannot map, cannot control, and cannot easily dismiss. They have spent years perfecting their ability to reduce others to simple categories: the needy one, the dramatic one, the clingy one. But when your depth refuses to be categorized, when your complexity defies their simple explanations, they find themselves in the unfamiliar position of not understanding someone they initially thought they could read completely. This fear manifests in their attempts to provoke you into revealing more than you intend, to push you toward emotional displays that would reduce you to manageable proportions. They become frustrated when their usual tactics fail to elicit the dramatic responses they expect. Your refusal to perform emotional chaos for their benefit leaves them without their preferred methods of maintaining distance and control. Your depth threatens the avoidant's carefully constructed worldview that emotional engagement leads inevitably to emotional destruction. When you demonstrate the ability to remain centered while caring deeply, to maintain your boundaries while staying open to connection, to preserve your autonomy while building intimacy, you challenge their fundamental assumptions about what love requires and what relationships cost. The avoidant's fear of your depth intensifies when they realize that you possess qualities they have convinced themselves are incompatible with emotional health. Your ability to be vulnerable without being weak, passionate without being desperate, loving without being possessive, forces them to question whether their own emotional limitations are necessary protection or self-imposed prison. Most terrifying for the avoidant is the recognition that your depth might inspire them to explore their own suppressed emotional capacities. The very qualities they fear in you are the qualities they have buried within themselves. Your depth serves as an invitation to emotional territories they have declared permanently off limits, suggesting possibilities for connection and intimacy that their defensive structure was designed to prevent. Your mysterious depth becomes their obsession precisely because it represents everything they want but are too afraid to pursue. They find themselves drawn to what they cannot understand, fascinated by what they cannot control, and hungry for access to emotional experiences they have convinced themselves are too dangerous to explore. Creating mystery in a world of emotional exposure, in an age where emotional transparency has been elevated to the status of virtue, where people broadcast their feelings with the frequency of breaking news, where every thought and sentiment is documented and shared. Mystery has become the rarest and most powerful commodity in human interaction. The avoidant, bombarded daily by others' emotional exhibitionism, has grown numb to the constant stream of feelings, confessions, and revelations that characterize modern relationships. Your ability to maintain mystery in this landscape of exposure transforms you into an exotic creature in their world of emotional predictability. Mystery is not the absence of depth, but the strategic management of revelation. It is the art of showing enough to intrigue while concealing enough to fascinate. When others around you are performing their emotions like amateur theater, your restraint becomes a masterclass in sophistication. The avoidant, accustomed to partners who mistake emotional vomiting for intimacy, finds themselves confronted with someone who understands that true power lies in what remains unsaid, unexpressed, and unexplored. Your mystery operates by creating information gaps that the avoidant's mind compulsively seeks to fill. While others provide complete emotional biographies within hours of meeting, you offer only carefully selected chapters, leaving vast territories of your experience unexplored and unknown. This selective revelation makes every piece of information they do receive feel precious, earned rather than freely given, significant rather than casually offered. The power of mystery lies in its ability to make the avoidant work for what others surrender without effort. They must pay attention to subtle cues, interpret small gestures, and read between lines of limited communication. This mental effort creates investment, and investment creates value. Suddenly, understanding you becomes a project worthy of their intelligence, a puzzle that deserves their sustained attention. Mystery transforms your presence from constant background noise into intermittent but significant signal. When you speak less frequently, your words carry more weight. When you reveal emotions sparingly, each revelation feels like a gift rather than an obligation. When you share your thoughts selectively, the avoidant begins to feel chosen rather than burdened by your communication. Your mysterious nature forces the avoidant to become curious about someone other than themselves, perhaps for the first time in years. They find themselves wondering what you think about when you're quiet, what you feel when you smile slightly, what you remember when you look distant. This curiosity transforms them from passive recipients of others' emotional offerings into active investigators of your inner world. Most importantly, mystery preserves your power by preventing the avoidant from feeling emotionally superior to you. When others display their complete emotional repertoire immediately, the avoidant can quickly assess, categorize, and dismiss them as predictable. But when significant aspects of your personality remain hidden, they cannot position themselves above you because they cannot claim to fully understand you. Your mystery creates artificial scarcity in a marketplace flooded with emotional availability. While others make themselves completely accessible, completely known, and completely predictable, you remain partially hidden, partially understood, and partially accessible. This scarcity drives up your value in the avoidance perception, making time with you feel precious rather than routine. The maintenance of mystery requires discipline that most people lack. It demands that you resist the urge to explain yourself completely, to share every emotion as it arises, to fill every silence with words. This discipline signals to the avoidant that you possess self-control, emotional regulation, and strategic thinking, qualities they respect because they recognize them as reflections of their own preferred approach to human interaction. The art of controlled revelation. Controlled revelation is the sophisticated practice of strategic emotional disclosure, where timing, context, and dosage determine the impact of what you choose to share. Unlike the emotional incontinence that characterizes most people's approach to communication, controlled revelation operates on the principle that information shared at the right moment, in the right amount, under the right circumstances, possesses exponentially more power than the same information carelessly distributed. The art begins with understanding that the avoidance attention is a limited resource that must be captured rather than assumed. When you reveal personal information in carefully measured doses, you create a series of small revelations that maintain their interest over time, rather than exhausting it in a single, overwhelming disclosure. Each controlled revelation becomes an event rather than routine communication, something they anticipate rather than endure. Timing your revelations requires reading the avoidant's emotional state and capacity for receiving personal information. When they are distant or preoccupied, even the most profound disclosure will fall on deaf ears. But when they are present and engaged, a small revelation about your inner world can have tremendous impact. The art lies in recognizing these moments of receptivity and using them strategically rather than squandering them on unnecessary communication. The dosage of your revelations must be calibrated to create hunger rather than satisfaction. When you share just enough to intrigue, but not enough to fully explain, you leave the avoidant wanting more rather than feeling overwhelmed by too much information. This technique transforms them from passive recipients into active seekers, making them work to understand you rather than being spoon-fed your entire emotional biography. Context determines whether your revelations will be received as gifts or burdens. A personal disclosure shared during a moment of natural intimacy carries entirely different weight than the same information delivered during emotional crisis or desperate pursuit. The avoidant respects revelations that feel chosen rather than compelled, deliberate rather than desperate, strategic rather than simply reactive to their behavior. Controlled revelation requires that you maintain a substantial reservoir of unexpressed thoughts, unexplored feelings, and unshared experiences. This reservoir serves as your source of future intrigue, ensuring that you will always have something new to offer when the moment is right. Most people exhaust their interesting material within weeks of meeting someone. Controlled revelation can maintain interest for years. The art reaches its highest form when your revelations seem to happen naturally rather than strategically. The avoidant must never feel that they are being manipulated or managed, even though your disclosure is carefully planned and expertly timed. The best controlled revelation feels spontaneous while being thoroughly calculated, natural while being completely artificial. Your revelations gain power when they contrast with your usual restraint. If you typically say little about your emotional state, a single disclosure about your feelings carries enormous weight. If you rarely share personal history, one story about your past becomes memorable. The contrast between your usual mystery and your occasional revelation makes each disclosure feel significant and special. Most importantly, controlled revelation allows you to shape the avoidant's understanding of you gradually, rather than allowing them to form quick judgments based on emotional overflow. You become the author of your own mystique, controlling the narrative of who you are by determining what they learn about you and when they learn it. This authorial control prevents them from dismissing you prematurely while ensuring they remain invested in discovering more. When silence becomes your greatest strength. Silence transforms from mere absence of sound into your most formidable weapon when you understand that the avoidant has spent their entire life using other people's words against them. Every relationship they have abandoned began with someone talking too much, explaining too much, and revealing too much of their emotional hand. Your silence breaks this pattern with devastating effectiveness, forcing them to confront someone who cannot be defeated by their usual tactics of emotional withdrawal and strategic dismissal. Your silence becomes strength when it demonstrates that you do not need their validation to feel secure in your own worth. While others exhaust themselves trying to convince the avoidant of their value through endless explanation and justification, your silence signals that you already know your worth and do not require external confirmation. This self-assurance terrifies the avoidant because it suggests you have options they cannot control and resources they cannot access. The strength of silence lies in its ability to reverse the traditional power dynamic that governs avoidant relationships. When you refuse to fill uncomfortable pauses with nervous chatter, when you resist the urge to explain your emotions during their withdrawal, when you maintain your composure while they create distance, you force them into the unfamiliar position of being the one who must work to maintain connection. Your strategic silence creates a void that the avoidant's ego rushes to fill. They begin to interpret your quiet confidence as indifference, your emotional restraint as rejection, your independence as abandonment. This interpretation triggers their own abandonment fears, which they have spent years projecting onto others. Suddenly, they find themselves in the position they usually force others to occupy, wondering where they stand, seeking reassurance, and working to secure attention. Silence becomes your greatest strength when it forces the avoidant to confront their own emotional limitations without the distraction of your emotional chaos. When you stop providing drama for them to react against, stop offering problems for them to solve or reject, stop presenting emotions for them to manage or dismiss, they must face the emptiness of their own inner world. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their emotional poverty back to them. The power of your silence grows when the avoidant realizes that their usual methods of control have no effect on someone who requires nothing from them. Their withdrawal cannot punish someone who is already emotionally self-sufficient. Their criticism cannot wound someone who does not seek their approval. Their indifference cannot manipulate someone who has learned to find fulfillment independent of their attention. Most powerfully, your silence communicates that you understand the game they are playing and refuse to participate according to their rules. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to bridge the gap they create through emotional distance, you signal that you are operating from a position of strength rather than need. This recognition forces them to respect you in ways they never respected those who begged for their attention. Your silence ultimately becomes your greatest strength because it transforms you from someone who needs them into someone they need to understand, from someone who pursues them into someone whose attention they must earn, from someone who explains themselves into someone whose thoughts they hunger to know. The ultimate withdrawal, disappearing into your own power, the ultimate expression of power in dealing with an avoidant, is not the dramatic exit or the emotional confrontation, but the quiet disappearance into the fullness of your own life, where their presence becomes optional rather than essential, their attention welcome but not necessary, their approval pleasant but not required for your continued existence. This withdrawal is not reactive but proactive, not punishment but self-preservation, not manipulation, but the natural consequence of recognizing that your energy is too valuable to waste on someone incapable of appreciating its worth. True withdrawal begins not with changing your behavior toward them, but with redirecting your focus toward the aspects of life that actually provide satisfaction, growth, and genuine connection. You stop organizing your schedule around their availability and start building a life so compelling that their sporadic attention feels like an interruption rather than a gift. This shift in focus signals to the avoidant that you have discovered something more interesting than their emotional unavailability. Your withdrawal into personal power demonstrates the ultimate lesson that avoidants both fear and respect, that you do not need them to complete your emotional experience. When you stop treating their presence as the solution to your problems and their attention as the answer to your needs. You become someone they cannot categorize, cannot control, and cannot dismiss. Your independence becomes more threatening to their ego than your dependence ever was to their autonomy. The power of this withdrawal lies in its authenticity. Unlike strategic manipulation designed to provoke a response, genuine withdrawal stems from the recognition that your time, energy, and emotional investment deserve someone capable of reciprocity. The avoidant senses this authenticity and realizes that you're not playing games with them. You've simply found better games to play. This ultimate withdrawal forces the avoidant to confront what they have lost rather than what they have escaped. When you stop pursuing them, they cannot maintain the comfortable fiction that they are the pursued party graciously tolerating unwanted attention. When you stop providing emotional labor, they must acknowledge how much they depended on your efforts to maintain even the semblance of connection. Your disappearance into your own power creates the one thing that can shake an avoidant from their emotional complacency, the genuine possibility of permanent loss. Unlike the dramatic threats and emotional ultimatums they have learned to ignore, your quiet withdrawal carries the weight of finality. They sense that you are not temporarily upset, but permanently uninterested in maintaining relationships that drain rather than nourish you. Most powerfully, your withdrawal demonstrates that you have learned the lesson they spent so much energy trying to teach you, that emotional independence is more valuable than emotional connection with the wrong person. When you embody this lesson completely, when you live it, rather than simply understanding it intellectually, you become the very thing they claim to want, someone who needs nothing from them. The ultimate irony of your withdrawal is that it often provokes in the avoidant the very pursuit behaviors they found so distasteful in others. Having trained you not to chase them, they discover they have created someone worthy of chasing. Having taught you not to need them, they find themselves needing someone who no longer needs them back. Your power becomes complete when you realize that their response to your withdrawal is irrelevant to your well-being. Whether they pursue or ignore, whether they recognize their loss or rationalize it away, whether they change or remain the same, none of these outcomes affect your decision to invest your energy in people and pursuits that actually enhance your life rather than diminish it.